I had the wonderful opportunity of studying with a guy in Philadelphia whose name is his name still is Dennis Sandoli, who had a great system for teaching young people jazz. Coltrane actually studied with Dennis Sandoli, I think took 4 or 5 lessons when Train was young in Philadelphia. Pat Martino was a student of Dennis Sandoli, and then they became colleagues in many respects. But Dennis had a very, very, very unique system to train and to teach us, and I feel blessed to have had that opportunity. That system was that every lesson we would take with him, he would give the typical, little figure to learn in all keys. He would demand that we learn to play that figure as well as accompany ourselves on piano. He would also demand that we wrote a piece of music each week, which we then would bring in and play for him on piano, as well as improvise to that set of chord changes, which was a great way to prepare yourself every other, I used to go every other week because it was too much to do in 1 week. So every 2 weeks you had a lesson like that. The other, I think, wonderful but scary thing that he did was that he would invite other students of his to hang out and listen. And he did one day to me when I was about 19 years old. He said, "Well, Mike, Pat Martino is downstairs." He said, "Why don't we invite Pat to listen to your lesson?" And I panicked, of course, because when I was 19, Pat was 21 or 22, already playing brilliantly, of course, and he was already a name. And he brought Pat up, and Pat listened to my lesson. So I was a little scared, but what a great opportunity to be in the company of greats and let yourself, express yourself and hope that you did the right thing. And if you didn't, you learn from that as well. When he was probably finished with the Navy, so maybe in his very, very early 20s, maybe 21 years old, when he came to Philadelphia and spent some time. Never talked about him, just the fact that he had studied with him. Dennis had a voice almost like Miles. He would talk kind of like this, that Pat had Train studied with me a few times. So he would tell us little, just stories about the fact that Pat came in to take lessons from, that Train had studied with him and taken a few lessons, but never talked about those lessons, no. He never really talked about anyone other than told you that they were his students, because he was very proud of that. Dennis was an interesting character. He also was a poet. And when his poetry, as well as when he spoke to you sometime, you would almost at that time go to the dictionary. Now you could go to Google. But probably every third word of his was a word that I did not even know. And I have a fair knowledge of the English language. He was a very, very astute, bright man. Yeah. And people lived. It was, like that old almost Parisian thing that we hear about, or European thing. People hung out with him. He had a great little, like a brownstone in Philadelphia, and he had a studio where he taught, and then he had a large room on the ground floor level, and students and players used to kind of just hang out at Dennis's. There was a whole lot going on there, and it was all about music and philosophy and talking and learning from each other. It was like the old days of, poets and authors and people sharing coffee and so many, sharing their thoughts and philosophies and their thoughts about life. Dennis kind of had that environment around him all the time. So it was a very, very artistic, very artsy feeling being included in. I'll tell you another interesting thing that he did not like, though. When I was in college, and a few of us, my dear friend who was the trumpet player in the quintet that we had in college, his name was Steve Weiner, who you don't know by name, but a great trumpet player. In fact, Randy Brecker asked Steve to join the band that he played with Blood, Sweat, and Tears after Randy left. So that tells you about how Steve played. And when Steve and I were doing those collegiate jazz festivals that were around when we were in college and winning some, which we were so proud about, when we went to Dennis's after we won our second one day for our lessons, and Dennis said, "Oh, the jazz stars have arrived." And it was not a compliment. He was not happy with the fact that we had allowed ourselves to be part of a jazz competition. And I have grown to feel the same way. I don't like jazz competitions, but as a kid, I felt that I was doing things for the college. I thought I was getting myself out there, and I did it. And I did not have the ego that prevented myself from learning or wanting to learn, but he was afraid, I think, that we would kind of just get overwhelmed by the accolades.